You've begged me and begged me to have this guest return. I'm going to capitulate because I care about you. So I've got Brian back on. And of course, because it's Brian, I do tend to try to be funnier than I am on other videos because Brian is a lot funnier than me. And, that's just a human thing to do. Brian, you've brought your humor back to us again. Glad to have you back.
Hey, great to be here, I suppose.
So if you like having Brian, hit the like button and then hit notify if you'd like to be notified every single time that Brian's going to be on in the future. And you have to hit subscribe before you hit the notify. And then there's always this business of chasing Brian and I around the internet. So he's got his own channel, YouTube channel. He's on Twitter. You definitely should follow him both of those places. And if you really want to help out, we both have Patreon, and signing up for $1 or $2 or $5 a month. Both of us are thrilled when that happens. So, and thank you for all of those who are already doing so and supporting both of our channels. Okay, Brian, you are an expert on some things. and so I discussed with you in the green room, because, we have a green room here in Maui too, or Kauai. Where am I? In Kauai, I've set up a green room. And so in the green room, before we came on, we were discussing things that you are expert at. And I have become a little bit focused right now on where will that next Gigafactory that's been promised to be announced by the end of this year, where in the world is Elmo going to be next?
So I think it's fun because we don't know, just like we don't know the location of what appears to be a safe house that you're in. I would say, so about a year ago, I made a video called Giga Mumbai is Next. And I made a very compelling case for why I thought India was the next big, good fit. Now, the amendment to that I would make is that I had a number of commenters from India saying it wouldn't be Mumbai, it'd be somewhere else. It'd be a different city than that. But India is a strong candidate. Canada made the top of my list, interestingly. I'd have to double check, but it came in real high at number 2.
Okay, that's high.
Yeah, that's high. Japan came in number 1. And a lot of people thought that, well, that's insane. They've got that. It can't be Japan. They've got Toyota there. They've got a lot of big car companies. They've got a very protectionist market. They've got a deep, commitment to their right. But all that was true in Germany too. What they have is expertise. What they have is good ports. What they have is what they lack. The thing they lack is access to raw materials. But that's never really slowed them down in the past. So
they're also lacking a little bit in terms of workforce, because they are
aging out.
Their population is shrinking, so workforce could be an issue in Japan. Yeah.
I don't think it will, because I think the Japanese brands are going to fall in lockstep, and that there will be a lot of available employees.
So, lots of people with lots of experience ready to jump ship. Yeah.
Ready to jump ship. And the reason India came out so high, both of those are right-hand drive countries. The reason India came out so high is because it's got a big domestic market. You can't get in otherwise. And their 10-year GDP growth looks very strong. To me, they are today where China was 20, 25 years ago. And yes, there's corruption. But if you're making something of this caliber, you get cooperation from the top, which can stem a lot of the lower level there's corruption in China. There's corruption there's corruption in America. Yes. You just have to be able to get past it. And that's why that's why they built in Texas rather than California's. They didn't want the red tape. The median income is strong in Japan, but it's looking to increase in India. And both of those countries have fantastic engineering. India's got over 3,500 scientific schools that train, engineering universities.
Right.
And they've got a very smart, very strong workforce. And the low wages are a factor. That may be why Mexico was chosen over the U.S. But high labor is no obstacle, which is why they still build in the U.S. and building
And Germany.
and Germany. Germany has very, very good wages compared to China. And Tesla pays well above average in China, and it works well for them.
Yeah, so that's pretty funny because I was coming to the conclusion. I've been coming to the conclusion that India is next, partially to do with all the activity that's been happening there, but more. India has the second largest English-speaking population in the world.
Yeah,
After the United States.
5% of the country speaks English as a first language, which is why the call centers started there. I worked for a company that was one of the first to offshore call centers, and it was brilliant. We were using them to generate leads for our business, and you would get this cold call from a woman with a beautiful British accent, and the quality of leads went up, the quantity of leads went up, and so we got to tap all these amazing English. Well, instantly you run out of talent because most of those people already have better jobs, and so then you get all the people that are working the call centers today. So yeah, the English speaking part of it is huge, and English is a very dominant language in educated India anyhow.
And we would also, in India, we would be looking at this, I think what you're referring to over the next 10 years, or I would even say the next 20 years, the leapfrogging of technology that we've seen take place in so many countries, including China, where they don't have to build the infrastructure for pre-1970 communication or transportation. They can build the infrastructure based on 2023 technology and leapfrog what Western nations had to do to get to the current technology. I think this is going to happen faster in India than it did in China. What do you think?
Absolutely. We're seeing it in all the developing countries. In Africa especially, a friend of mine is from South Africa, and she said that her village never really got phone lines, never really got them. They went straight to wireless. A company comes in, brings in a cell phone tower and a microwave dish, and now the whole village has cell phone coverage with reasonable data, with good data coverage. And just putting in, the first step before that was getting Wi-Fi at the community center, at the library. And then everybody would just kind of hang out in that area and use it. And there's no reason to have to start from the ground up like we did when the technology wasn't ready. And we may see that. India may skip a few steps if their next big factory is using Tesla's unboxed philosophy. We may see that become the way Indian cars are made. And the thing I love about India is all you'd need is an extra 2 to 3 inches of ground clearance on any car, and it can handle the roads. Whoever gets there in a serious way is going to have a monumental first mover advantage. And Tesla would be going there with their Giga Mexico style factory, seeking to make 2 to 4 million cars within a few years. Nobody's going to be able to catch up to that. Not even the domestic players like Tata are going to be able to produce on that scale. They'll try, and they'll do a good job, and every bit helps. But India, like all the other countries, is eagerly moving towards removing internal combustion from the roads because they're noisy, they're polluting, and then you're at the whims of the global market for energy prices, where India could have their own mini space race, their mini Manhattan project, where they just say, you know what, we're going to build 5 new solar factories and put all of those panels within our country to generate power. We'll cover a lot of the upfront, and then it's just very, very cheap after that. And if they do that, oh baby, it's going to be a new world in India.
Tony Seba said that it would take $10 per citizen per year. Yes, $10 per citizen per year to completely electrify India in 10 years. 100% solar, wind, and battery in 10 years cost $100 billion or $10 billion a year. And they could completely electrify the entire country.
Wow.
So that is the kind of leapfrogging that I'm referring to. Plus, their population is still growing. China's
Among the
is
few.
shrinking.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and China's is shrinking. So now India has actually, depending on who's doing the census, I'm not sure how you get an accurate census of either country, but according to the World Census information that just came out, India has passed China in population, and that should continue to make them the largest country in the world. What about the export? It seems like they're also perfectly poised because they have all of the Southeast Asian countries around them, Pakistan and all of the Vietnam and Cambodia. These are also countries that are all exploding and have the potential to explode.
The nice thing about India is it's closer to England to export right-hand drive cars than
Oh my gosh.
Shanghai, right?
Yeah,
And and it's not unreasonably far from all the other right-hand drive countries, which were the former imperial countries. So yeah, Thailand is not close to India, but a whole lot closer than other factories might be. Now, there's still a lot of talk about Giga Indonesia, and the only reason that would make sense is to get the nickel and the other metals. But if we're using LFP batteries, which I believe is the plan on the compact, those are materials that are already abundant in India. Not so much Japan, but definitely in India. They've got plenty of lithium, and they just discovered a whole lot very recently. They've got steel, they've got aluminum, they've got everything they need right there. And as an export hub, it would be great because you'd be building a car probably for less money than what you're getting out of Shanghai, in part because the factory would be of a more modern design, and in part because labor, which is a small part of the equation, but every bit helps. I mean, if you can trim just, $10 a car, that's 40 million a year on 4 million cars. Pretty soon you're talking about real money over the 10-year lifespan. That's $500 million. It starts to count. And the factory would probably only be on the order of 4 to 5 billion to build in its entirety, because as you know, Tesla is uniquely capital efficient when it comes to the construction of their factories.
right. So what's the case for Canada?
Canada, let me take a look. Canada scored second, I think. They scored very high, second. And it was because they've got such a big GDP. They're in the North American trade zone. Their GDP growth is modest. That's not it. Their corruption is very low. Their political stability is high. Median income is high. Engineering is high. Domestic resources through the roof.
Yes.
Their political will to be determined, but they would only go there if there is the political will. And they already have a tremendous amount of domestic auto production. It's not Canadian companies, but it's Canadian factories. So they have all the pieces. They have the know-how, they have the money, they have the workers, they have everything.
So are you thinking this would be in the Great Lakes area or someplace else in Canada?
I do. I think it would be near Detroit because that's where the factories are. It would have to be where the expertise already are. So maybe Toronto, but and it would be able to draw somewhat from expertise from the big three. Surely there are Canadians that work for the big three who would just as soon move home. And the other thing you need in your factory selection is a diversity of locations. There are people who don't want to move to California for any number of reasons. There are people who don't want to move to Texas because they think all of Texas is West Texas. And there are people who just don't like the heat. And there are people who don't want to leave their home country. So are we going to exclude an entire pool of talent just because there's an imaginary line drawn through the forest?
Yes. So, hockey players, you forgot that group. They would.
Yeah.
So why not South Carolina or North Carolina? That's where everybody I know wants to move. If they don't want to move to Florida or Texas, they want to move to Carolina. So is Carolina on your list?
No U.S. locations are on my list at this time because they've already got so many eggs in this basket. Texas is ginormous with room to expand. They'll expand there first. Nevada is in the process of expanding. Come on. Again, please turn a shovel. Haven't done it yet. And then you've also got Fremont and New York. So I don't see the U.S. being on the list for anything other than expansion and a very strong likelihood of significant upgrades in Fremont.
Well, the other big one that we haven't talked about is South Korea. So South Korea seemed quite excited about the prospect. I'm not sure that Hyundai Kia are excited about the prospect, but the government of Korea seemed very excited. What do you think about Korea?
Interestingly, that wasn't on my list. So
Wow.
I did, my first 12 were based on ones that I had considered, and my second 12 were based on viewer suggestions, and somehow that didn't make the list. I think Korea is a very strong candidate. If they have the political will, it'd be the perfect fit because they're moving way too slow with electrification. They've got the expertise, they've got the know-how, they've got all that. And again, what they don't have is the raw material. And I know this in part because the other day I saw a ship leaving down the Columbia River, and I was curious what kind of ship it was, so I looked it up. It was a bulk container ship headed to Korea, loaded down presumably with steel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so yeah, raw
yeah.
materials will be an issue for them, but I think the other issue for them is labor. They are also shrinking in terms of population. I think their births per fertile aged woman is under 1 at this point, maybe even zero point 0.7. So their population is shrinking, and their unions are already strong. So that was one of the big negatives that I saw on South Korea. You hear those things too?
No, but those are all reasonable considerations. I don't think any of those would be a deal breaker. I think, yeah, no, I don't see those being a problem. I think it's more they're not a right-hand drive country, so they lose that one small advantage. It would be nice to have dedicated export hubs for each side of the market. But the right-hand drive market, despite being 35% of the world's countries, is a far smaller percentage of the world's population. Or maybe that's the No, I don't remember now. But it's not enough to make it a deal breaker. But yeah, but if they're going to go to Korea, why not just go to Japan?
I see. All right. So last two, I don't think there's any chance at all that these are on this year's list. I have a hard time imagining them being on the list even 2 or 3 years out. Africa and South America. It seems like the problem with both of those places is skilled workforce. Obviously, there's political issues depending on which country. But what do you think the odds are of anything happening in the next 3 or 4 years in either of those continents?
Well, certainly very low. All of the very, very few African candidates I scored did not score particularly well. But Brazil scored 6th on my list of 22.
Whoa.
Because Brazil has a huge domestic car manufacturing industry. They make tons of cars. And while they're not the richest country, they're among the richest in South America. Yeah. And they would be excellent for exporting to other parts of Latin America, even across the ocean potentially. And they've got great natural resources. Let me see. Let me grab it here. Mm-hmm.
See, political stability and crime come to mind.
Yeah. Well, I use the corruption index,
Okay.
which put them at 38 out of a possible 100, which is not good. And let's see. Yeah, they got negative points on that for
Yes.
political stability. And median income, ooh, you ready? 4,500.
Ooh, ooh.
Ooh, that's
Yeah,
not good
yeah.
at all. Is that monthly? No. Good gravy. Let me see. Well, it's got Canada at 19,000, so it's a quarter of Canada's median income. Engineering talent I put very high. Domestic resources high. Import tariffs that scored very high because their import taxes are very low, so they could get, or maybe it was their export. Yeah, it must be their import. Political will it scored low because there's been no real talk of it. But
Yeah,
domestic
yeah.
auto sales is 319,000 units. So that's pretty decent, or maybe that's an index score. This is a year ago. Oh no,
Well,
domestic
300
auto
300
production is Go ahead.
That's a decent number, but not really that many in the. I mean, compared to 4 million in Japan, say.
Well, Canada makes 1.4 million cars, and Canada makes 2 million cars, and Brazil makes 2.9 million cars.
But they
So
export.
maybe they're exporting them, and because.
Yeah,
Oh
well,
no, I'm sorry. There we go. I was on the wrong line.
Okay.
Canada only buys 319,000 cars. Brazil buys 1.6 million.
Oh, they buy
Because-
that. Okay.
Because they're a pretty big country.
Yeah. Well,
So-
that's a decent market. That's
Yeah. But if
All
you're
right.
making a factory that makes 4 million and your domestic auto sales is only 1.6, you got to do some exporting, my friend.
That's right. All right. Well, Brian, this is exactly what I wanted to know because I've really been thinking about it a lot. I'm still right now, I'm thinking it's India, but who knows? I could change my mind in a week on that one. I don't know enough to really have as strong an opinion as I normally do because nobody that watches this channel thinks I'm opinionated. So, Brian, where can they find you?
Well, they can find me at My Tesla Weekend. They can find me on Twitter at 4K Podcast. The YouTube is probably the most fun place you're going to find me. And, that's probably the best ones.
Once again, if you like having Brian on, this is the time when you hit the like button because I can't tell when you hit the like button, but, well, sometimes I can kind of get. Anyway, but it doesn't matter. If you liked it, hit the like button and then notify, subscribe. And we both have Patreon. And I know I can speak for both of us that almost couldn't do this stuff without Patreon, and we both are so thankful for those that are supporting our channels. Would that go for you too, Brian?
I definitely can't do it without Patreon. I would have been out of business a very long time ago, and I certainly couldn't do all the trips I do where I get to meet all kinds of interesting people and see all kinds of interesting things.
Yeah. All right. Well, okay, Brian, thanks again for being on the show. And for those of you out there, it's been great talking to you.
Click the link below to get your paperback, Kindle, or audiobook now.